Welcome everyone to the August 31st meeting of the Militarized Equipment Ad Hoc. Today we are going to talk first a little bit about scheduling, and then we are going to get into Lieutenant Toribio's revisions to K6, the department rifle policy. After that, we will get into the new 3G policy, which has not yet been posted on the website, but we just got a draft via email today. Looks like a lot of work went into it, so we're excited to take a look at both of those. First, before we get to K6, I appreciate your enthusiasm, Lieutenant Toribio, for sharing the screen. You can keep it up, don't worry. I wanted to get a little bit into scheduling and sort of how I kind of see this approval process going as we get through the commission meetings. I do anticipate that there will be 3 commission meetings in the month of September, are regularly scheduled on September 8th, September 22nd, and one sometime during the week of September 12th. We're not sure when, if it's going to be on the Thursday or the Friday. I think we need that meeting. And my plan was to present 8 of the policies during the month of September, and then 4 of the policies in the month of October. I would anticipate presenting the first 4 at the September 8th meeting, seeing if we have approval on those or if edits need to be made. Then coming back the following week, presenting the other 4 policies, as well as bringing back the ones from the 8th, seeing what we can get approved or if needs more edits, and then coming back finally on the 22nd to wrap everything up. Looking at the status of the different policies, my thought was that for the 8th, we should do K7, armored vehicles, since that is has been through a number of processes already. Looking at K6 and the one that we're looking at today, I think that we could potentially do department rifles. And then Lieutenant Turner, I know I asked you only about a few hours ago. Do you have any thoughts on what the last one would be?
Let's see. Yeah, I was thinking perhaps Sim, if we can do that. I know we're coming back next week, but yeah, either, well, that would be kind of one of them, and I'm not sure what other ones, if there's a way we could do any of the 3 that DQ has shown. Drones, I know drones is the longest one, or the one that's been the closest, LRAD or robots.
I think so. The 8 policies I had that were kind of a must pass by the 22nd, considering local ordinance as well as department need, were K7, K6, which is rifles, 3H, which is SIMs, 3G, which is crowd control, VF02, which is chemical munitions, flashbangs, armored vehicles, and robots. And that's based on Monday's statement that the department might be okay if we don't get to breaching by the 22nd. Yes. That would leave 4 policies for October, the first meeting in October, which is October, I think, 13th, which would leave LRAD, drones, mobile command posts, and breaching. And that'd get us through the 12 policies.
Yeah.
Thoughts on the plan?
I think that works. We can start. Yeah, I think if there's one more, I know SIMS is one that we have not too many other things to do, and that's kind of on my list. So I may kind of pop out tonight and just work on that while we're working here. That could be the 4th for that week, and then I think we can probably get some other ones for into the next week, the week of the 12th, and then the 22nd. Yeah.
Thank you. Any thoughts from anybody else? Much appreciated for all your hard work. One thought I did have, since we had mentioned on Monday that we were going to try to do asynchronous review of the impact reports, is if there is some way that we could get those impact reports en masse as soon as they are ready, either posted, or you can send them to me and I'll get them posted to the ad hoc website. So at the very least, the community will have an opportunity to review those, even if in draft form, as we slowly work on them and try to solicit or collect feedback in some way. That part I have to figure out still.
Okay. Yeah, I think probably the, yeah, I know we're kind of in the same boat in terms of getting people to update the website. The guy who just did our website just left. So yeah, it would be nice if we can do it on the commission's website, but understanding that you also are in the same boat. Either way, if we need to do it on ours, we can figure that out. That means I need to break out my GeoCity skills, then we'll do that. But
GeoCities, I haven't heard that in a while.
Yeah, there you go.
Okay, that sounds like a plan going forward. Thank you. Lieutenant Toribio, will you take us through the new version? I would like to say I got to get through it. Some good work here.
Thanks. Good evening, everybody. Acting Lieutenant Toribio, going over K6. So what I did, hopefully it was clear, it was really early this morning when I sent that email out. But what I did was last time, I inserted comments whenever there was like a correction that needed to be made or something that needed to be clarified. And so I left those comments and just replied to them so I can reference it here as we go through it. So first, I just want to check to make sure that everybody can see my screen. I'm kind of jiggling it around a little bit. Perfect. Okay, so just scrolling down to the first comment. The first edit or revision was some clarification on privately owned rifles, and are they covered in the policy? Are they reported as military equipment? And is there tracking? So privately owned rifles, I kind of fleshed it out more here. So I'll just kind of review here. I don't think everybody really had time to review it. Again, I'm sorry I sent it out so late, but essentially what this policy does now is it classifies privately owned rifles used for departmental purposes as a department rifle as it applies to this policy and as it applies to reporting for the mandatory military equipment deployment. So how that's kind of broken down here, it says, this is, I think, old language that was here. It says privately owned rifles, they're approved by the respective TAC team leaders. Just one sec. Okay, and then it says that anybody using a privately owned rifle has to pass the current marksmanship qualifications before they're able to deploy it in the field. And in addition to that, they're subject to this order and all related orders as it relates to department rifles. So any reference in this order that refers to department rifles categorically includes authorized privately owned rifles. So that means anything that talks about an AR-15 style rifle, like a patrol rifle. If somebody on the TAC team has a privately owned rifle, all those conditions apply for their privately owned rifle. If someone's using their own AR-10 sniper rifle or manual bolt action sniper rifle, any reference to that rifle in this policy applies to that privately owned rifle. So that is how that was addressed here. Any questions or concerns regarding this verbiage? I'll leave it up here for a second. Also, obviously, I'll send you guys, once we're done tonight, the edits that we do tonight, so everybody can kind of give it another look over. Scrolling down, I kind of screwed up in referencing certain sections. So I went through, kind of checked my math, and I think I got everything. So any references to other sections, I went ahead and verified that I'm actually referring to the correct section. The next section was in the section on policy and deployment and discharge, particularly the discharge, it makes reference to K3 and K5. And so what was agreed upon last meeting was like, hey, let's include a little bit of verbiage from K3. And so this stuff that I'm highlighting right now, I ripped straight from Department General Order K3 and kind of tweaked it a little bit to just include the rifle versus like a handgun or the shotgun. And it just says that, an officer's going to need to be able to articulate the need for the use of force and whether or not an officer's life or somebody else's life was in immediate peril and there were no reasonable alternatives available at the time. So hopefully this clarifies the discharge portion. I also included, because this general order now includes all department rifles to include tactical team rifles, any reference to like discharge or deployment of the rifle beyond like the patrol rifle program would fall under K5. And so I referenced or included a reference to DGO K5, which is our tactical operations team. That breaks down our entry and our sniper teams, under which this policy also applies for rifle purposes. Keep scrolling down. I fixed another reference. Moving down to the next section. One sec. Oh, sorry. Okay, so here was one point that it was brought up, and I wanted to clarify something and why I had originally wrote it how I wrote it. So on our matrix for evaluating candidates for the PRO program, we look at these categories here. It was IAD sustained findings, and it was recommended, hey, let's look at just IAD complaints. That should be a factor in it. And so the reason why I reverted back to it is because it's kind of beyond the scope of the PRO program when it comes to just overall complaints. So let me kind of unpack that a little bit for you. So an officer has, 5 complaints versus an officer who has 1 complaint over the last year or 3 years or however long we're looking. And we're going to ding a guy or not give him as much points if he has 5 complaints versus the guy who has 1 complaint. But if you kind of get into the weeds of it, there are instances where, let's say that Lieutenant Turner and I are asked to go assist on a search warrant. And so we have no, we didn't put anything into the search warrant. We're simply additional bodies to assist with the execution of the search warrant, which was approved and signed by a judge. The person upon whom the search warrant is being served makes a complaint on everybody on scene because they believe that the warrant was unlawful. So now Lieutenant Turner and I, we're going to have an IA investigation, and it may resolve completely fine. But if we're looking at just IAD complaints, that's going to kind of it's going to unfairly kind of harm us as we're looking at this. Now, we do have a system set up already through our PAS where they look at, and there are triggers for like numbers of complaints. So they'll look at like my complaints, and if I have an inordinate number of complaints compared to other people in my peer group, it'll raise a review of my personnel file. So there are already systems kind of in place to look at stuff for just strictly numbers, and that's kind of beyond the scope of the PRO program. So if there is somebody who has an unusual number of complaints for people in his peer group, that's going to get flagged already. That's going to be reviewed by the PAS unit, reviewed by the officer's supervisor and chain of command, and a recommendation will be made on no action, monitoring, intervention, et cetera, et cetera. So I think that's why, and this has been long-standing, this kind of protocol. I believe that's why we're looking at just, okay, hey, look, let's see when someone has actually been found sustained for allegations of misconduct and use that as a metric for gauging eligibility for a PRO school. So that's why I reverted back. I didn't want to change it back without clarifying to the team here why I did that.
Can I ask, you said something about an inordinate amount of complaints. What is that number?
So there is none. And again, this is kind of a little bit out of my ballpark, but my understanding, and please, like JT or Jeff, DQ, anybody step in if I'm wrong on this, but the complaints, they look at like your peer group, and then they look at the number of complaints you have. And if you're like an X percentage over the rest of your peer group, if you're an outlier, then it triggers a review of your file to see if there's any sort of underlying issues that you're having, or signs of, inappropriate behavior, or, malfeasance, stuff like that. So there's a different unit that does those reviews when those numbers are looked at. And it's only when they trigger a review that it ends up going to like the supervisor and whatnot.
Okay. And then the reason why I mentioned it last time, I think I was me, was because the prior policy, K6, the patrol rifle officer program, specifically IAD complaints in there. And so this seems to be not moving, or this seems to be moving away from that.
Okay. So I was not aware of that. And I apologize for giving a little bit of incorrect information. That may have been the case. It may be in the prior file, but the practice has been, at least since I've been one of the coordinators for the PRO program, it's just to look at sustained findings. And I can't remember if it's within 3 or 1 year, but it's just a form that was kind of passed down from the last coordinator that we use. And it was specifically sustained findings. So that's what we've been looking at for at least the last 8 years or so, is the sustained findings. JT?
Yeah, so one thing I think that, is Lieutenant Toribio was kind of talking about too, is that there is a PAS process, right? There are thresholds when we talk about the number of complaints that is in our risk management status. So one of the things that risk management does include a lot of personnel information. So that is something that may not necessarily be available to our patrol rifle coordinator, something like that. However, that is something that these people's chain of command will be aware of. So as you can see, there's also this, when they're going through this process, they need to get chain of command approval. So even if this person doesn't have a bunch of sustained findings that they may have, where their chain of command says, there's a pattern of complaints, I don't think this person is ready for a rifle, the chain of command can have information that the patrol rifle staff may not have access to. So I do kind of tend to agree with Lieutenant Toribio here on that sustained findings is it's a clear numeric that the rifle program is sort of has the experience to deal with. The person has a sustained finding, it's, it is kind of black and white, and then they can tell whether that's an issue that is going to impact that or not. In terms of the sort of more around risk management and those thresholds, things like that, that's something where we'd expect the chain of command to talk about in their evaluation when they're endorsing or not endorsing this person for the rifle program.
How often has that sort of, I guess, the chain of command or the supervising officer told you, hey, this person's not really ready, they've had a lot of complaints and issues, it may not show up in wherever you're going to look?
Specifically complaints, there's one person in the last maybe couple years, he tried out or wanted to try out the last couple years, and it was specifically for complaints in his demeanor that was the subject of those complaints that led to him not even continuing through the testing process. Just one offhand that I can remember. Stuff like that kind of stands out. I don't recall, at least in like the 7-8 years or so that I've been heavily involved in this process, I can't recall of really anybody else specifically for IA purposes, but most recently there's been somebody.
If it helps the group understand, Steve, what really happens a lot is that, the supervisors are so in touch with their people between the usage of vision, biweekly meetings, and the PAS review panel that 90% of potential candidates for the PRO program are going to speak with their supervisor and request their input on whether or not they should even apply. So essentially the weeding out process begins very heavily before that officer even puts his pen to paper in a memorandum requesting intent to test. The supervisor will talk to them about the state of their career, their training, their current expertise, and whether or not they even qualify. So I found that most people, especially when I was at the sergeant level, would ask me, and that discussion would be candidly had, and they would simply not apply, knowing that they weren't going to qualify in the first place. It just wasn't their time.
Yeah, that's a good point to piggyback on that. So this section here, this is just one component of the overall score that the applicant gets. But beforehand, before it even gets to us, any one of these things could prevent somebody from even getting through the application process because it stopped like at the supervisor level. And offhand, this has played a part. A supervisor came up to me before the last school and said, "Hey, Officer X came and wanted to apply for the program. Does really good work. He's super proactive and he's really good. But I looked and he's called in sick a ton. So I told him, hey, give me, a good year of being dependable and showing up and not abusing your sick days, and then I'll endorse you." So we never even saw that application. Anything else regarding this?
Is there a I'm looking at E, out of compliance uses of force. I'm wondering is there a max number of out of compliance uses of force or anything like that?
It's scaled. So and there's like a point value. So if they have 0 out of compliance uses of force, they get 100 points. And I don't have the sheet in front of me, but if they have 1, they'll get like 90, 2, they'll get 80. And then after a certain number, it's just 0 points. So that would give them 0 points. And the number that gives them 0 points may not necessarily equate to like an automatic disqualification. And that's where we kind of rely on the endorsement process for this. So this isn't like a lot of other assignments where, hey, I go to personnel and I drop a letter because I'd like to be a patrol officer. This is pretty unique in that we write in our general order that you actually have to get an endorsement from your chain of command for the program.
I'll just conclude. Like on the one hand, I completely understand having an actual metric and a number that actually means something, meaning sustained findings. Someone actually reviewing whatever conduct there is. And that is a solid number that is not soft by any means or not based on someone's subjective view on a situation that occurred. I'm also very much in tune with the idea, like just because a comparable situation, just because you get arrested a lot doesn't mean you've committed a crime in every situation. So I get it. Just want to recognize that this is a break from the previous policy, and as long as it's deliberate and y'all seem very much on top of it, I think I'm okay. I won't.
Okay. I just fixed this last point. This was the first time it appeared in the order and it wasn't spelled out. So I just spelled out or wrote out LRMS. Okay. So a big discussion point last time was the authorized deployment and how it kind of read, it was a little ambiguous how like these seemed to be conditional, and was it all of these? Was it just one of these is an automatic qualifier for deploying it? So what I tried to do here was I left these points because I think they're important to leave as considerations. I'm sorry, not this port, down here. But I I changed the language a little bit. So I'll just kind of go through this for people who haven't had a chance to read it. One thing also was a thing on safety. And so to include like the backdrop of your potential target. So I included fundamental rules of firearm safety that we kind of teach day one in the academy. So this paragraph stayed essentially the same. And I added this. So when safe, feasible, and without compromising law enforcement priorities, officers shall use de-escalation tactics and techniques in order to reduce the need for force. The goal of the department is to promote thoughtful resolution to situations and to reduce the likelihood of harm to all persons. Now, I wish I could take credit for this, but I essentially ripped this from K3, which was just worded better than I can word it. So I felt it very appropriate to include that as it falls under deploying rifles. I then listed the 4 fundamental rules, as we call them, of firearm safety. And those are: we just treat every gun like it's loaded. We always keep it pointed in the safe direction. We're supposed to keep our finger out of the trigger guard and off of the trigger until we've made the conscious decision to fire, and to be aware of our target and the area beyond around it. And these aren't exclusive to Oakland PD. These are kind of like universally accepted firearm safety rules. So if you want to go buy a gun and you have to take a safety class, you're going to need to memorize these, write them down during a test. Okay. So this section here was where it became a little fuzzy in terms of, hey, look, if it's just one of these things, it's like it's automatically cool to do it, or is it all of these, or what is it? So I left these as considerations, and I added this paragraph at the bottom, which states that these points above, it's not an exhaustive list, and nor are they, like any one of these, just an automatic grounds for rifle deployment. All right, there has to be some thought, there has to be some consideration. So it's really based on the totality of circumstances, and we just need to be able to articulate the reasonable need to deploy. And what this falls under essentially is sort of the main, or the most fundamental case law for using any force, and that's Graham versus Connor, and that's just that force has to be objectively reasonable. Jennifer?
Thanks. For B2, the engaged person is beyond the effective range of pistols or shotguns. What is that range?
We train that the general effective range is 25 yards. Now, what we teach is that it's dependent on the individual and knowing yourself and knowing your capabilities. So while generally speaking, you know, the average distance for effective use of a pistol or shotgun is 25 yards. Gosh, you know, under stress, moving target, having a small target area to hit, it may be much closer, right? Or somebody with a lot of experience shooting, somebody who has military experience and actually has had, you know, combat experience and stress under fire. They may feel more comfortable taking an accurate shot from a farther distance away, but in general, it's considered 25 yards.
Do you think we could add that, just like make it more explicit of 25 yards?
Yeah, I can add it. Just, if you're okay, I'm just going to let you know when I add it, I'd like to make it conditional that it's not like a hard and fast rule, maybe more just for reference, that generally, you know, because there may be times where, how can I explain this?
I think we understand that you're not setting a minimum range. How about that?
Yeah.
Yeah, maybe I can help Trivio out, because I know if I go to a scene, Trivio is probably pretty good at 25 yards. I know I am not. I'm around 15 yards, maybe 20 on a good day, if there's sunlight out.
So one thing that I'm thinking about here is, I know that the impact report is going to explain how the difference in the assault rifles impact on the human body is compared with the department pistols or shotguns, and so I'm wondering, given that difference, I'm kind of assuming that the closer you are, that might be magnified. And if that's the case, is there a point at which it is just you can be effective with the department pistol or a shotgun and cause less harm to the person who's being shot?
Lot to unpack there. So a lot to unpack in terms of like wound ballistics, and then also just the force that we're actually using. So I'll start with ballistics. So going 25 yards with a rifle, going anything within, I'd say, within 25 yards, you're not going to see much in terms of a difference in wound ballistics. It has to do with the round, and that the distances, even the max distance that we would take a rifle shot, it's not going to be much different than if we were close at 25 yards. What the main factor that's gonna play into what happens when that round hits what it hits is going to be the medium that it hits. So shot placement is one thing, right? So I can shoot somebody with a rifle, I could shoot somebody with a shotgun, I could shoot somebody with a 9mm pistol, a 22 pistol, and the biggest factor is going to be where I hit that person. So distance plays actually a pretty minimal thing. Now, to the second part regarding like damage. So the theory that we operate under is to stop a threat. So we don't even categorically think like that we shoot to kill, we shoot to end a threat. But if you look at the nature of the equipment that we're using, guns by design are designed to cause serious injury and an effect of death, right? So we're getting into like a weird area of like, do we, what's the purpose of shooting? And the department has always maintained, if we're doing it, it's in immediate preservation of the officer's life or somebody else's, and to end a threat. By nature of the equipment itself, it's designed to cause serious injury. So I don't know how to reconcile, weighing like causing like less damage, because the tools are inherently gonna cause serious injury or death just by design. So I'm not quite sure how to reconcile that.
Yeah, thanks for the ballistics lesson. That was really helpful since I didn't know any of that.
Oh, for sure.
I understand where the department is coming from with wanting to preserve your optionality. I still would personally like to see a little bit more specificity in when a assault rifle is going to be deployed. I know this is a lot of work. I saw all of the work that went into putting that level of specificity into the armored vehicles policy. But I just want to encourage the department to really dig in a little bit more and get and to narrow that non-exhaustive list from we can't define when it's going to be deployed to something much more specific.
So okay, and DQ, I see your hand up. I'll get to you in a sec. So hopefully I can contextualize this also in a different way. The end result of the discharge of a rifle is going to be the same as a pistol or as a shotgun. It's just which is going to provide more of an advantage of stopping the threat. And primarily, it's going to be distance. It's going to be the level of the threat that we're facing. If the person has a pistol, where we're going to need distance. So distance is going to be probably one of the most significant things. But I can look, I'll look and I'll make a note here to look for things that we have in policy for deploying just even a pistol, because this essentially falls under the same criteria. It's just which would give us the best advantage of accomplishing what we need to accomplish in terms of stopping the threat. DQ?
No, I put my hand down. Thomason already kind of jumped in when about a prior comment. That's it.
Erickson?
Yeah, I had a question when it comes to like, is there any language of that's restraining these rifles from being used as like batons or like, you know, using them to hit the subject with the, I guess the area of the handle or like on the, you know, like does they restrict any of that? And I think where I'm also coming from is even like when it comes to using or discharging any firearm, we see cases that multiple officers are shooting at one subject, and that could be like for Mario Woods and others, you know. And I think sometimes that's excessive. And is there any language that that restricts like code red policies, you know, like when you put in another clip, you know, and is there any language of that?
I understand the first part of your question. I don't understand the tail end. Let me respond to the first part. So there isn't verbiage here that discusses using the rifle as an impact weapon. We do teach instances in which when it's the like it would categorically fall as an improvised impact weapon. So like we don't teach to use your flashlight to hit somebody. But we do teach like if the flashlight's in your hand and it's like the only thing and most appropriate thing to use at the time, it's something that could be considered for use as kind of like a short baton or something like that.
Right.
So it would categorically fall as an improvised impact weapon. I will look at that policy and see if I can pull verbiage to include here.
Okay. And for the second question, it was more like, you know, is there any communication between officers like, hey, I will do it instead of having like multiple, you know, I guess that could be like more on the scenario, but, you know, just seeing from like previous cases, like there could be, yeah, like an execution squad basically, like, you know. And is there a minimizing of scenarios like that?
Yeah, so, and I see your hand up, JT. So a lot of that is covered in our dedicated arrest team policy, where we talk about designating people for particular roles. So we want somebody who's dedicated as primary armed cover. So somebody whose role within the team is to protect the team with a lethal force option. And we have somebody who's designated as our talker cuffer. We talk about, in terms of de-escalation, utilizing cover, having armor out there. And we advocate in policy and in training that if you don't need to be exposed, then don't be exposed. The only people who really should be, if at all, should be people who are dedicated to protect the team with lethal force or protect somebody else with lethal force if necessary. So we have stuff in kind of sister policies or kind of you know, related policies that cover those tactics. That's more of kind of like a tactical thing that is covered more in terms of the DAT policy for like team-based tactics. JT.
Right. Thank you.
Yeah, Steve, you took my words out of my mouth for the second part. Yes, Mr. Ma, we definitely see the concern and about those things. And it is covered in the designated arrest team policies. So when you have multiple officers as a team, they think about those things to make sure that doesn't happen. And then for your first question, there is actually in our use of force policy a specific prohibition about using firearms as impact weapons. Unless basically it's a life-threatening situation or for those very specific things that the patrol rifle program teaches about using it as a muzzle strike. But yeah, things like, you know, beating someone with the butt of the weapon or something like that is prohibited.
Chief?
And I just wanted to add, going back to the first part, as far as a number of officers assigned roles and responsibilities in the designated arrest team, there's also a risk management piece that as an organization we look at. So every month we do get our use of force data and statistics, and we obviously can differentiate out the types of force utilized, including pointing of a firearm. And we see increases or anomalies are outliers, either by areas or by squads. One of the conversations that we have is it isolated to an incident, or are they several incidents? If it's isolated to an incident and there's multiple displaying or pointing of a firearm, then we start asking about the level of supervision, command and control, what were the circumstances. So there is a level of redundancy, not only in training, but in risk management, oversight, and discussions. And if we see something as a command element that causes us concern, that doesn't rise to the level of misconduct, but maybe needs retraining, we then can offer up follow-on actions for either retraining, counseling, and of course, if we do learn of misconduct, it could also open up investigations as well. So we track the data, and the data is utilized in these risk management processes.
Thank you.
Okay. Is there anything else up to at least point B? And let me just summarize what my job is here after this. I have it to look to incorporate verbiage regarding distances, and then also look for other policies related to firearms that talk about when they should be deployed, and incorporate that verbiage in here too.
I'll make a note for you for that last part, which is K3 subdivision H-2, which is drawing, exhibiting, or unholstering firearms. I would assume that for the department rifles, the decision to deploy those rifles would be above and beyond the standard there, which is reasonably believes necessary for his own safety or for the safety of others. Sounds kind of like these three factors that are here are above, or when that precondition has been met, when it's reasonable, when an officer reasonably believes it's necessary for their safety or for the safety of others. That might give it a little bit more definition.
Perfect. Thank you, sir.
Yep.
The next part here was there was a little bit of questioning on what do we do if there's a request for an inappropriate deployment. Okay, so I added a provision here, and I think this was resolved in our discussions last week, where the deployment of the rifle is separate from like the discharge of the rifle. So what I did here was I'll just kind of read it here. So I said that there may be instances where the supervisor or commander has additional information to which the rifle officer is unaware, and time may not allow for an explanation of the circumstances for the rifle to be deployed. The best way that I can, kind of make an analogy to this is I see Lieutenant Turner handcuffing somebody in the street, and somebody else is walking away, and I pull up and he says, "Hey, Turbo, go handcuff that guy." And the guy's walking away. I'm not going to stop and have a discussion. So can you explain to me, please, the reasonable suspicion you have that leads to me putting handcuffs on this guy? Just using, the good faith rule, I'm going to go and handcuff that guy. So this is just explaining that there may be instances where the incident commander has information to which the rifle officer is not privy to, and then he's telling them to deploy. But along those lines, I'm saying also, or I added here, like when practical, the officer and that supervisor commander should brief the situation together to try to get on the same page. So even though an officer is being directed to deploy, that K3 still applies and K5 still applies. If an officer is having to shoot, they still have to be able to articulate the intent, means, opportunity, and ability, and how this person is an immediate lethal threat. And it's not just, well, this commander told me I can deploy my rifle, so I'm kind of free to do what I want with it. So I hope that this kind of cleared some things up for this section. Are there any questions or concerns regarding this verbiage?
Could you maybe it helps. I saw a note about accountability on follow-up in these circumstances. So when there is a rifle deployment, there's document there that is documented, and then when it's documented, someone takes a look at that, and I imagine there might be, when that rifle officer writes that up or makes that note, hey, I deployed because a supervisor told me to do so. Does that sound right?
No, I'm sorry, I'm not tracking on the question.
Sure. No question. Okay. When a patrol rifle officer deploys because a supervisor told them to do so, how is that documented?
That would be documented as if that's the only thing that the officer did. So there was no use of force. It was just the display of force. They document it as a KDE, and they also log it as in their log to be reported to the staff for military equipment deployment.
When is that reviewed by somebody?
So to my knowledge, I don't believe, oh, well, I guess the only time it would be like a red flag. So part of the memorialization of all of these deployments is we have to write the crime and or the reason for deployment. So, and I'm one of the people who gather these stats for the patrol rifle program and then for the sniper team. So if I have an operator or an officer who comes to training and then I'm looking at their data book and I see, hey, I deployed on this date and time at this location and area, and I deployed because my sergeant told me to, and there's nothing else there, I think that would kind of like raise a question. That hasn't happened. That's not to say it can't, but it's just nothing we've come across. There's always something that explains like it was a 187 or murder search warrant, or it was a carjacking, all like serious crimes under which we deploying a firearm. And I have not come across an instance where the sole reason was because they were directed to. There have been instances the opposite where they were told not to deploy, which is a separate thing. But
is there a procedure set up, or what is the procedure if you would see that? What would you do?
There is no procedure, but what I would do would seek clarification, because not only does it raise like an internal question, but this stuff is going to be published. And we need to have a legitimate reason for the deployment of this military equipment. So there'd be some follow-up questions. Hey, who authorized or who told you to do it? And go have a conversation with that person. I have the incident number and or the report number. So I just look up the incident as well and read the report or look at the CAD purge and see, maybe I'll just by that alone, I'll see, okay, I see why it happened, right? Or if need be, I just do some follow-up with the supervisor or commander who authorized it.
Our patrol rifle staff, would they all act in the same way if they saw that a deployment based on a supervisor order and nothing else?
Sorry, give me 1 sec. Could you repeat that question?
Sure. I know that you're one of many staff.
Uh-huh.
Would all the other staff members do the same thing if it was just the single explanation of direction by a supervisor?
Well,
just investigate.
I'd like to think so. And the reason why I'm saying that is because I'm the only person right now who's gathering all that data. I kind of took lead on, because this is a new thing that we're gathering this type of information for the military equipment deployment. So I'm the only one who's gathering all this information. I really.
What? Did you freeze? Are you there? Thinking.
Have a lot of vested interest in the program. I'm sorry?
Sorry, I thought you froze. It might have just been me.
Can you hear me? Can you guys hear me?
Yes.
Okay. Yeah. No, I'm presently the only person that gathers this information. If I'm not able to like make a training, somebody else will gather it and give it to me, but I maintain kind of like the master file of these deployments and pass it along. So that's on me to just, cross-train the rest of the staff, let them kind of know what I'm doing and fill them in on stuff. And they know that all of this stuff is going to be published for for, the public. And it's all, reported beyond the department. So, that's just something on me to pass along.
I won't ask you to think of it on the spot, but I wonder if we might future plan for a time when, God forbid, you may not be there in that position, maybe because of a promotion or something, and how we ensure that piece of accountability that someone looks when there is the sole explanation a supervisor told me to. It sounds like you're doing that, and I think that's a great thing. I think that's a very important accountability piece. I just want to make sure that that is, how do I say this, hardwired, or there's some way to ensure that it continues.
For sure. No, I 100%.
Thomason?
Yeah, I think maybe we can just add a line that if it does happen, like a supervisor commander does, order the deployment, that they're responsible for doing a military notification. And I think in the military notification right now, they have to do a summary and justify why that it was deployed and the number of rifles that were deployed, stuff like that. So that'll take care of the notification, and that goes straight to the SOS, which is the Special Operations section for the yearly report. And it's also tracked, and numbers are tracked and everything.
Got it. Thank you, guys.
Good idea.
Awesome. Okay. So there was this section on dispatching dangerous animals, and I felt it was more appropriate to move it to like the prohibited uses section and list exceptions to when you can, like exceptions on the prohibition of shooting a dangerous animal. So we'll get to that. It's highlighted down below. Okay, so modifications. I kind of revamped this whole section, and I really wanted to kind of break down. I felt it was important, just based on the discussion, for clarity for people to kind of understand the control that we have, and how serious we take, any alterations that are being done. There was stuff about modifying rifles for fully automatic use, for attaching weapons like a bayonet or like another launcher or something on it. So having those considerations, which I hadn't just really thought of, they weren't on my gauge at all. I kind of revamped this section. So this says that modifications to a patrol rifle, including altering components, replacing them with alternate components or additions to them, they're prohibited unless they're approved by the patrol rifle program instructor staff, and they're only completed by a member of that staff. So the list that follows, though it's not exhaustive, are components under which this applies. So these are literally like all the main components of the rifle. There's the trigger assembly, and this is the biggie for like making it an automatic weapon. There's the bolt carrier group. I know this may kind of seem like Greek to some people. I apologize. Or if you do understand it, I don't mean to insult you by going over it. If you were to break the rifle into two main pieces, it would be the upper and lower receiver, and it kind of breaks down those components a little bit. These are the sight systems that we use to aim. Okay. And then I included a section that says, hey, it's okay to replace these pieces, but they have to be approved and inspected by the staff. And that's like the sling. If somebody wanted to use a different flashlight or mount, because ours kind of aren't the best, and the charging handle. This is something that's used to manipulate the bolt, and we need to manipulate this when we're loading the rifle. I mentioned it last week, but this is problematic for left-handed users. So they make ambidextrous charging handles. So these get swapped out a lot. So I included that. I also mentioned stuff like hand grips and hand stops. And so what these are, sometimes you guys will see, like, imagine the long part of the rifle where someone's holding it. Sometimes there's like a peg or like a little part that juts out at the bottom that they're gripping. That would be a handguard grip or like a hand stop. And what we're saying is you can attach it only if it's been approved, inspected, and installed by a member of the staff. And that's just like a comfort and stability thing. Some people have a hard time holding the forend of a rifle, so it's nice to have a hand grip or a hand stop on the long part, the forend, just so it's easier for the operator to hold the rifle. I also wanted to kind of put a little catch-all to stop things from being just so definitive in the verbiage. So I said everything in sections A through C. So that's the stuff that you can't modify, the stuff that you can modify, that they're not, and the handguards and grips, it's not exhaustive. The list is not exhaustive. And just that any modification has to be approved by the patrol rifle program instructor staff, and no changes can in any way change like the fundamental functionality of the rifle to make it fire in a different method other than how it's designed and intended. And I specifically added that any modification or component that allows burst, so like that's you press the trigger and it like fires 3 rounds. They have some weapons that are capable of doing that, or 6 rounds, or fully automatic firing. That's completely prohibited. So I hope this kind of section is a catch-all for that. Moving that to, can you guys hear me? I'm showing I have kind of a bad internet connection. Hopefully it's okay. For tactical team rifles, where there's a little bit more liberties, they have more equipment on them, like on their bodies. And so people kind of modify rifle forends and whatnot just to make things like lighter, or some guys operate with gloves, some guys don't, and pieces run hot. So they add or will replace handguards to make the rifle cooler to the touch while they're holding it. This just says that replacing any components, they're prohibited unless it's approved by a tactical team leader. And then I included the same verbiage saying that no modification can in any way change the functionality, so it makes it fire differently. And that includes the semi-automatic rifles that the team has, or the manual bolt action, which the sniper team has. Anything that changes it to other than like semi-automatic, completely prohibited. I mentioned specifically also the attachment of other weapons, like a bayonet or a separate launcher. None of that can be attached to the rifle. This wasn't included in the last one, I don't believe, but I included it here, that personal magazines, they can be used as long as they're inspected. Magazines get beat up a lot, and we're constantly trying to replace them because they're dropped on accident, on purpose, when we're practicing reloads, or you have a reload when you're at training. So we're always going through a bunch of magazines. So we're saying that they're okay to use personal magazines as long as they're approved and inspected by the patrol rifle instructor staff or tactical team leader, and that the magazines, they can have markings on them, like the operator's name or serial number, or like an alphanumeric thing to number the magazines. That's important because if you're having problems with the magazine, you'll put a little marker on it so you kind of know, oh, this one's causing me problems. I'm just going to use it for training. I'm not going to take it out in the field, etc. And then overall, we don't want to do anything that kind of shows, anything negative or just inappropriate. We want to keep these things just stock as possible. So like morale patches, aftermarket emblems, stickers, tokens, or any artifact, we're not going to attach it to a rifle or magazine. So, people have even stuff like, had like a department emblem. We don't even want to affix that. It's like, let's leave these rifles as they are. Don't attach things to it. Don't attach any personal, squad, design or anything like that. Just keep this stuff stock. Going on to prohibited uses. Okay, so I added this comment here. This was what we talked about, impact weapons. So I'll go and I'll look and I'll include that stuff here. Essentially, what I'm saying here is that any rifle deployed, including privately owned rifles, I'm sorry, does someone have a hand raised?
You can keep going.
Okay, sorry. I think my internet connection is not so great.
No, it's good. You're good.
That anything that's not described in the section of 9 above for approved deployments, it's prohibited. And the issue, I think that's what I had last time. And the issue was, you know what, can we kind of spell some things out, like some specific examples where we don't want these rifles deployed? So I included that here. So this was all I had last time, I think, during non-high risk vehicle or pedestrian stops. And so the issue that was raised last time was, hey, like what's a high risk stop and what wouldn't be considered that? So I pulled verbiage from Lexical Procedure 302, which talks about high risk stops. And there isn't like a concrete definition aside from saying that it involves persons or people who are suspected of having committed a serious crime. And I kind of massage the verbiage to make it more universal and hopefully understandable. So what I said was that high risk stops, they're involving people who are suspected of having committed a serious crime or presenting an immediate or anticipated threat, needing having armed cover, meaning having a firearm throughout the detention process until the subject is handcuffed or otherwise deemed safely detained. And then absent these circumstances, rifles should not be deployed during these stops. So if we don't need to have a gun out because this person is not high risk, don't have your rifle out. Now that's what this component is saying. So this the next point is during routine patrol with no specific threat or articulable facts is outlined in section 9. And that's where it went into talking about people who have firearms, people who have body armor, people who are high risk, but at a distance beyond the effective range, which I have to clear up. That's this point here. Also, they should not be slung just like as a matter of course during an incident if deployment isn't required or reasonably pending. And then this is where I moved the part about dispatching animals. I said, and I just changed the verbiage to make it fit it being prohibited with an exception. So they shall not be used to dispatch a dangerous animal except when a departmental pistol or shotgun is inappropriate. For example, distance, type of animal, etc. Questions on this section on prohibited uses, understanding that I do need to include a point about impact, it being an improvised impact weapon. Okay.
Doing great. I want to make sure that we do get the crowd control. And I know that we saw you've added a section about the reporting part to capture the personally owned.
Yes.
I appreciate that, and I appreciate all the changes that you have been making so far. Do you think you could get us into the parts of the policy, the remaining parts, since there's just a little bit more?
So we're here at section 13, storage and security. And this just says that rifles, when on duty, they need to be stored in one of two ways. In a gun case, locked in the trunk or a rear storage compartment of the assigned vehicle, or in the rifle rack of the vehicle. And then this lists the condition of the rifle. And given the type of firearm that it is with a free floating firing pin, and that may be Greek to some people, this essentially verbiage here renders the rifle in a condition where it can't go off accidentally while driving. So you hit a bump in the road. If it's loaded, meaning there's a round inside the chamber, so if I were to press the trigger, it would fire. There's potential if I hit a bump that the rifle can go off. We store our rifles in vehicles in a condition where that can never happen. So this just articulates those steps that need to be taken for that. Further just says that, we need to store rifles in a secure location with restricted access, such as a locker or a secured cab. We say that they can take their rifles home if they can adequately secure them at their residence, and that's often needed when they need to go to training and whatnot. We underscore this a lot, that they're not to be stored in privately owned vehicles except when traveling, like going home or going to work. We don't want people leaving them in their cars overnight. And then we also mentioned that TAC team rifles can be stored in their respective team's equipment vehicle. So these are secured vehicles at the Eastmont substation where team equipment is stored. The next section just talks about training and qualifications, and those vary depending on whether it's a patrol rifle or a tactical team member. And this just says that these guys need to attend the requisite training and pass the requisite qualifications, and that the instructor staff and the tactical team leaders need to maintain documentation of that training. Jennifer?
Thanks. For the I see you've got quarterly marksmanship training, but then later in section C you say training as required. Can you spell out what that training is, just so it's going to comply with AB 41?
Yeah.
Well, thanks.
Got it. Okay. The next section talks about the decertification process for patrol rifle officers. So it's obviously an officer position. So when the officer promotes or transfers out of a field assignment, they're no longer a PRO. They may also resign voluntarily. The next section, section C, discusses kind of like an involuntary categories or considerations, including substandard performance, not progressing at training, mistreatment of the rifle, not performing adequately during training evaluations to include, fitness, shooting, reality-based training, and not responding to remedial training, having unsafe tactics during deployments, and then obviously failure to comply with provisions of this order. Yes, Jennifer?
Thanks. I know that there was that matrix that was considered for deciding if someone could use these. Does that ever get revisited? Like, let's say someone had no complaints about use of force, and then after they get their rifle, suddenly they have all of the complaints of use of force. How would that happen here?
So that's typically going to be done as a matter of the PAS process, right? So they look at the person's entire file and all of their auxiliary duties. And so that's something that's done at a supervisory level or their chain of command, where they look at, like, like he's exhibiting bad tactics or he's exhibiting poor use of force. He has this rifle. We're gonna take it away. So it's a little bit beyond the scope of what the patrol rifle instructor staff is even privy to. So that's all through the chain of command.
Makes the final call? Is it the instructor staff?
It's going to be so that, like, if during a PAS review, for example, supervisor recommends, this officer can't have a rifle, and it's agreed upon through the chain of command, that is going to supersede what the patrol rifle instructor staff says. Like, the staff can't say, I hear you, chief, but I'm going to leave the rifle with this guy or this girl. So that's going to be a chain of command decision. There are things here, though, if the staff believes that the person should have the rifle removed. And so the staff submits a memorandum documenting everything that leads the staff to believe that the person should be decertified. And that goes to the BFO deputy chief and the immediate supervisor of that officer, first level commander, and then area commander. So everyone in the chain of command is advised via memo from the staff on why this person should be decertified. The staff then consults with the deputy chief to determine if remedial training would fix the problem or if it's just cause for immediate removal from the program. And then anybody who's removed from the program has to immediately give up their rifle to the staff or member of the range staff. The next section talks about remedial training, and it says that if it is prescribed, then the staff kind of develops and schedules appropriate training for the subject PRO. And then the staff notifies the deputy chief if the training has been successfully completed and if they're recommended for recertification. If there's a positive endorsement, then we immediately notify the PRO and then their chain of command that they're recertified. And if it hasn't been satisfactorily completed, then the staff has to forward another memorandum through the channels detailing that the remediation training failed to adequately recertify the PRO and that we recommend removal from the program. And then with the negative endorsement from the deputy chief, we notify the PRO and then we remove the operator from the program. So next says anyone who's decertified for unacceptable performance or conduct, they have the right to appeal in the same manner as like the performance appraisal report. So for every performance appraisal that we issue, there's like an appeals form and there's steps that they can take. And this is just saying that they have the same rights to appeal. And then it's ultimately going to be decided by the chief of police. So all of those steps were for a decertification of a patrol rifle officer. And I added just a subsection here at the end to refer to DGOK 5 for members of the tactical team, because there's an entirely different, or there's a separate section in K5 that talks about decertification. So this just references that. The last section, thank you, DQ. I read this almost verbatim. I wasn't aware until I attended this meeting and talking to Thomas and DQ about this stuff that had to be added in JT. So this just talks about the inquiry and complaint process, references the government code, and makes reference to DGO M3 for complaints regarding department personnel or procedures, which is more for this here. Questions? Okay, so I'm not gonna, yes, Jennifer.
Sorry, this isn't on this one, but it is regarding the rifles. Is under the equipment inventory, it lists the lifespan isn't listed. And so I'm wondering if you might be able to update that.
Yeah, is that in the what's the other document that accompanies all this stuff?
It's not the case 7, it's the inventory.
Yeah, and I apologize to you guys, especially to JT for not providing all the input that you need for the impact report for these rifles, both TAC team and PRO. I'll get on that this week. I apologize.
To address Jennifer's specific question, do you expect the lifespan of the equipment to be detailed
Gotcha.
in the impact report, or does it need to be in this document, Jennifer?
I think it'd be most appropriate in the impact report. It's a bit unusual as well, because it's not like when something fails with the rifle, it's not like we replace the whole rifle. We've had like little components kind of break here or there, and then we just swap it out. And all of that is logged. And that's under the section that talks about logging stuff, how we document significant maintenance and whatnot. So, but there's nothing that talks about like the lifespan of a bolt or a barrel or anything like that.
Oh, I'll email the link to you, so that way you know what I'm looking at, and then
Perfect.
you'll be able
Okay.
to figure out.
I'm sorry if I'm like completely missing what you're referencing.
All right, Lieutenant Turner.
Yeah, just for preview, yeah, the impact report will have it in there, but we really say, hey, the barrel has a normal lifespan of about 15,000 rounds, but other than that, it's a piece of machinery. It lasts kind of as long as we can maintain it. So it's really kind of unknown, but depending on how much you maintain it, how many parts you replace, it could be years.
Great.
Are there any other questions? Thomas, and I'm sorry I took up so much time on.
No, I figured that it was going to go long. So we should have you go over crowd control. You can read all the lines.
Thank you very much for going through the policy. I think what we're going to do is take this final sort of steps a little. Jennifer describes it as asynchronous. I'm going to describe it as offline. And so you'll make these changes, send it to us as soon as you can. We are going to likely post them to the commission website and probably bring you back for the September 8th commission meeting to go over maybe not every piece of this particular policy, but perhaps be available for questions or address comments when it gets presented at the commission. Would that be all right?
Yeah,
We'll
absolutely.
figure out scheduling. Yeah.
Sure, for sure.
Thank you so much.
All
Thank
right.
you. These changes were great. Much
Thank you, guys.
appreciated.
No, I appreciate the input. Thank you.
Lieutenant Thomason, you want to take us through crowd control, and perhaps do we want to just focus on the parts that are relevant to this ad hoc, or maybe just the parts that have been changed? If you can do that.
Okay, first off, can you guys see my screen right now, or?
No.
No.
Toribio, will you relinquish? There you go.
There we go.
There it is.
So let me just go over, since I only got 45 minutes or 40 minutes, I'm going to try to go over a brief overview of the whole document. I'm not going to read line by line, but I'll go over the key points. And then hopefully, obviously you guys got this today. So if you guys have comments or questions, we can definitely hit it on a different date, which I am anticipating that we're going to have to do. So I definitely want to start off not at the first part of this document, but on page 28, just to go over, which we just added in. This was a great addition by the assistant chief, and it's subsection B on the last page, page 28. And this basically goes over what this document encompasses. So all these lawsuits that have happened over the past since pretty much 03 has been placed into this document. So we have the port protest that happened in 2003. It could have been 2002, 2003. We do have the Occupy protests, which are lawsuits there. And then we do have two current lawsuits that are going on right now. But a lot of this language that's in this document has already been consulted with those lawyers and has been placed into this document. And there's also injunctions that have happened over the course of the last couple of years that have been placed into this document. So, and this section is basically put in here, not for me, not for the AC or people that are getting ready to leave or retire. It's basically here for people that are going to be here long term. So if they do try to change or improve this document, let's say 5 years from now, that they're going to have to look at this section and make sure they look at all those lawsuits that have happened to make sure verbiage doesn't get changed that would impact that. So I'm going to go up to page 1. And so this policy goes over our crowd management and our crowd control. And basically, I go down to what it says, to uphold constitutional rights, free speech, and assembly. And that's what we go over every time during our lineups for any protests that are taking place in the city of Oakland or any crowd control situations. We always hammer this into the officers and the supervisors before they go out to the streets. And that's why we're here, to make sure that people have their rights heard, regardless whether we agree with it or not. That's their constitutional rights. As we go down to definitions, it's definitions about crowd management, crowd control, First Amendment activities, what they are, and then what a demonstration is, and what a crowd event or crowd situation is defined as. And that's in what this whole, this encompasses either events, and it could be special events, sporting events, festivals, concerts, or demonstrations. As we go down, we got the general principles, and a lot of this is about planning. So once the command staff is notified of a large or potential demonstration in the city of Oakland, the incident commander shall be responsible for developing a written operations plan. And that's it will detail that in this document. We definitely added this number 3 in here. So any crowd control operations plan that calls for the deployment of chemical agents or less lethal SIM. And then we added in the 13.6.2 section in here. And a lot of the 13.62 is incorporated in a lot of this policy. Incident command system shall be used for managing crowds. Number 5 is came over from our old policy, just internal affairs personnel, shouldn't be used for crowd control. And we also do that for certain parts, and you'll see in the policy, people assigned to the criminal investigations division. There are certain people that need to be separated out. So if there's like a mass arrest, or let's say there is a deployment of chemical agents, that someone needs to be there to be able to investigate this. And if they're involved in the front line and making the arrest, they can't investigate it. And that's the same with internal affairs. There's the CID portion. Right here, so any incident commander shall coordinate with city attorney's office or county district attorney's office for large crowd events, and when the EOC, and that's the Emergency Operations Center, is activated. And that's just to make sure that we check in with them, especially on current laws, let them know what's going on. A lot of times, especially in the last couple of years, it's almost become routine where we are sending our ops plans to our city attorney who's assigned to the police department to make sure that everything looks good and that it's lawful, or anything that might have changed that we're not aware of. And also, we did add in this recently, this section that the chief of police can direct the incident commander to coordinate with the city attorney's office or district attorney's office on any event that's occurring in Oakland. It doesn't just have to meet the criteria of being a large crowd or when the EOC is activated. OPD shall make the following principle establishing contact communications. So a lot of our demonstrations that do happen in Oakland, one of the key points is that we do assign our hostage negotiating team to the crowd control, to the protest, and then we direct them to go try to make contact with the organizers. And this is a set of communications. It's always a good time to find out just what the size of the crowd is, what the intentions are, or if they are planning to march or do things in the city of Oakland, try to get some intel on that. So it'd help us in knowing how many people that we need to be at this event. So I'm going to keep on trying to go through this. Deployment, decisions about crowd dispersal or general strategic or crowd containment or crowd direction, multiple simultaneous arrests, they need to be made at the level of operations chief or incident commander. So if there's any major arrests that are going to be taking place or uses of force that are going to be planned, it has to be taken at the level of operations chief or incident commander or higher. So a ground supervisor or actually a lieutenant that's not on the field cannot make that decision. And then keep on going down. It's just talking about the crowds and our formations. Police in the crowd, we want to make sure that we always have sufficient resources there to make an arrest. We can't just decide, hey, this is a good time to make an arrest. We got to make sure we have sufficient resources and we do it in a safe manner if we are deciding to make an arrest during one of these large demonstrations. Here where we get, this is going to be the helmet section. I added it in right here on number 5. So controlled crowd control helmets shall be maintained by each sworn member. Each member's helmet shall have their serial number on both sides and clearly visible. Crowd control helmets should only be used during protests or demonstrations to protect members from thrown objects. Crowd control helmets should be used at the authorization of the commander or supervisor. So we wanted to make it at least at the supervisor level to be able to don a crowd control helmet, since they're going to be out in the field. And hopefully I got another line in here which will help with stuff. In the event of exigent circumstances, officers can don their crowd control helmets to protect themselves. Only sworn members who have graduated from the Post Academy can wear crowd control helmets. The use of the helmets will be documented in the incident commander's after action report. And then I did add a line that's kind of from Trivia's to K6, is that crowd control helmets should not be used unless there's you can articulate a reason to wear it in public view. So basically, we don't want officers wearing their crowd control helmets to just go into routine patrol or calls for service. And then body worn cameras. I did change a lot of these. It was PDRD in the old policy. I did change it to BWC throughout this policy. Obviously, all officers and commanders are directed to wear their body worn cameras and activate them when it's appropriate over during policy. Regardless whether it's a permitted event or not a permitted event, we still will uphold people's constitutional rights. We'll also help facilitate if they do march throughout the street to help try to block traffic, and if it's appropriate. And that's what number 8 kind of goes into. Keep on going down here. Response to crowd situations, spontaneous event or incident. So this is for this section is if we're just out doing our routine patrol, and let's say they come across a protest. Sometimes like let's say a teacher strike or Kaiser nurses are protesting. It's something that's spontaneous, something that wasn't planned or that we didn't know of. So we wanted to make sure that we gave especially commanders or supervisors something that they can look back on and go, hey, okay, there's a spontaneous event happening, what do I do? And so instead of having the like in a planned event where you'll have an incident commander that's assigned to it, this one would be the watch commander would be responsible for taking control of the officers and directing them during this demonstration. And the key points still stay intact, you know, upholding First Amendment rights and make sure everybody's safe. So on planned, so unlike on unplanned, planned events, the special operations commander or designee would be, and that could be the incident commander, shall develop the written ops plan. So once there's a planned event, we do have time to try to plan for this. And so they'll be responsible for the ops plan. And then also the incident commander will be responsible for the overall coordination of the event. And this just goes into what the incident commander needs to think about and the information they need to get for their ops plan. And then we do have the Opd Event Coordinator, and this is a kind of a term from the old policy. And then we added in or incident commander shall or designee shall perform the following tasks. And we want this to be into the ops plan. And that's to gather intel, coordinate with special events regarding permits, if there's going to be permits into the demonstration or event. And then meet in advance with the sponsor. That's kind of like having the HNT or the hustle negotiating team make contact with them. Sometimes it might be appropriate for the incident commander to make contact with the event organizer, just depending on what the type of event it is. Also prepare the ops plan coordinate, inspect the area that the protesters or the demonstration might be taking place at. And then make sure ensure that there's a video team available and other protocols for arrest, like having a wagon there or a mass arrest team or a mass citation team. So permissible crowd control or crowd dispersal techniques. We did put in here the kinetic energy projectiles or chemical agents shall not be used by any member to disperse an assembly, protest, or demonstration. We definitely wanted to. You got a question, sir? I don't want to keep on going on.
Part of this is just out of curiosity, but I think it is sort of speak to the functionality of this. How the piece about meeting with the sponsors or organizers of an event, how often does that happen? And what is the sort of general out? I mean, I understand that this is like a street, like a block party or planned block party or something along those lines. But if it's a protest, is that something that is like feasible? Does that happen? And what is generally the outcome of that?
So just to go, I'll let the AC answer that. Go ahead, sir.
Thanks, Jeff. So believe it or not, oftentimes it happens more than you would think on demonstrations. We our negotiators and historically over the last several years, although one of our prime negotiators, he retired, is no longer with us, had good relationships with some of the demonstration planners and organizers. And oftentimes we will see messaging either through social media or through even community word of mouth that an organization or an event will be planned for a demonstration, and we will use those avenues to outreach to the organizers. Sometimes we establish good communication and they have their own safety monitors, and that can help facilitate the demonstration. Other times we reach out and we may not get positive contact, but we do make attempts. And then oftentimes on the day of the event, if we can't get in prior contact with an organizer, on the day of the event, we will approach individuals who might be setting up an event or who might be trying to organize in real time, and we'll approach them and we'll introduce ourselves and let them know that we're here to facilitate anything we can do to help exercise their First Amendment rights. And so if we don't have any kind of forewarning on who the organizers or planners are, we'll certainly make an outreach on the day of the action.
And is that in your experience, is that a thing that is effective? What do you see as far as like what that looks like functionally?
It's actually very effective. In fact, it was so effective that is one of the last iterations of the statewide post training after it came out of the governor's review, that one of the best practices that's being taught throughout the state of California is taking those opportunities to introduce yourself and make contact with demonstrating organizers, if not in advance, in real time, because we do want to assist in the facilitation of First Amendment rights while keeping it peaceful and organized, and being able to not have our first interaction with police as adversarial and confrontational, that establishing a relationship on the front end that could be more collaborative helps not only have an event that's peaceful and safe, but also identify anybody that may come in to try and disrupt the event with any kind of criminal intent, and identifying those individuals earlier throughout the event. So it does have a lot of benefits to it. It doesn't always result in good collaboration, but it's something that we are insistent on trying to establish those relationships.
Great, thank you.
All right, back on permissible crowd control and crowd dispersal techniques. We definitely want to have this section in here, the top section about kinetic energy, just to reinforce to the supervisors, officers, and commanders that, you know, chemical agents and kinetic energy projectiles shall not be used by any member to disperse or assembly, protest, or demonstration. So we have that in there, but then we go over the permissible ones. And that is make sure that, you know, if we're going to declare an unlawful assembly, that OPD uses simultaneous arrests to deal with nonviolent demonstrations that fail to disperse. And that's happened a few times here in Oakland since I've been here, like especially when we do set up that communication early on with a group that sometimes they are there to just get on the news and they want to be arrested. So we can help facilitate that, and that's part of that. If they do want to be arrested, we can do it in a peaceful way and make sure that they get their point across and they're expressing their First Amendment rights, and make sure everything's done peacefully. So incident commander or ops chief shall make the final decision as to what control action, if any, shall be taken to address a given crowd situation. And then these are just questions, you know, for the incident commander and supervisors. Make sure that they have this keep that thinking going when a demonstration is going on. And then when an unlawful assembly may be declared, so we did do the definition of Penal Code 407 in here. And then also we want to make sure, especially number 2, especially like, and I said that before, like even if they do have a permit or doesn't have a permit, or that doesn't take into account for an unlawful assembly. Okay, declaration of unlawful assembly. When only the violation present unlawful assembly, the crowd should be given the opportunity to disperse rather than face arrest. And so there's definitely criteria, especially when we declare unlawful assembly, that we make a repeated announcements, and then from different locations, make sure that we give egress and avenues of escape, and give people time to make sure they can leave if they need to or want to. And then dispersal orders shall be given in English or any other languages that are appropriate to the audience. And then this is a good number 4. The authorizing commander for dispersal orders should ensure that the name of the individual making the dispersal order and date and time each order was given is recorded. And that's recorded on the radio or in the CAD. And that's for, as we've had seen lawsuits in the past, and this is good for future litigation. Right here, number 6. So if there is a dispersal order given, this is going to be read out loud. And this is the person, especially doing it on the loudspeaker, can just have something that they can look at and read it to the crowd. So it's all uniform and we know what they're going to say. And it's easy to, when we do go to litigation down the road, that we can say, yeah, we read this.
How often is the LRAD used for that announcement?
I don't know the answer to that. I don't think it, I don't know. Assistant Chief, do you know?
So on in events where the crowd size is fairly significant and it's fairly loud, we use the LRAD pretty frequently when we're giving those announcements in those situations. And typically if it's getting into an unlawful assembly where there is either tumultuous or potentially riotous behavior or other criminal elements like looting or whatnot, because of the noise level, the LRAD becomes an effective tool. There's some situations where you could declare something an unlawful assembly if it's a small group, but maybe they're blocking the street, but they're not, you know, it's not loud and you know, tumultuous, but maybe the actions are prolonged blocking a traffic way. You'll see these in a lot of kind of civil disobedience cases where we have to set up maybe a predicate for a 409. You can have that kind of a verbal communication or with a handheld PA. But generally speaking, when their crowd size is large and it's fairly loud out there, we're using the LRAD to communicate so people can hear and know to leave and disperse.
I didn't see anything in this policy about the LRAD and its use in crowd control situations. Does that mean it's going to be its standalone policy?
I believe so. I don't know if it was in I know there is didn't we already hear the LRAD policy or?
We did. I'm
Okay,
just trying to figure out, like, when we go back to it, do we have to think about the situation, or should provisions about LRAD use during these occasions be here? Thoughts?
I'll talk to DQ. I know he did the LRAD policy to make sure that either it's in his policy or right here in this one.
Ms.
Are we saying
Jennifer?
specific? I'm sorry, say it again. Because I
We
know
gotta-
we have a specific outline when we're using the LRAD and we're explaining why. I thought it was also for specific, like civil unrest, etc.
And DQ, you might want to check. I thought it was in there too when we went over it, that it could be used for demonstration purposes.
Yeah,
I
I
just
think
want to make sure we're consistent either here or there, you know?
Okay.
Jennifer?
Yeah. I'll touch base with you after, Jeff, but it is in there that I thought that we're using it because we had kind of taken apart or taken away the 5150 portion and then kind of looped it in with the barricaded subjects, but we also had for the civil unrest, but I'll double check.
Jennifer?
Yeah, thanks. I like the idea that Commissioner Shea is posing. When we went over the LRAD, we went back and forth a couple of times about the use of the warning tone. And Lieutenant DQ was pointing out situations in which it might be exigent and really warranted. And I wonder if we could add a section for the LRAD to specifically for crowd control that restricts the use of the warning tone.
So
Okay.
it just in my experience, and I've worked a lot of demonstrations going back well over a decade now. I don't think we've ever used the warning tone in crowd management. So I would be okay with, I think probably the easiest way to get there would be to reference it in the LRAD policy. If it's there, DQRA for civil unrest, that one area would just have a prohibition on the warning tone for civil for demonstrations and crowd events.
Okay, yeah, I'll look into that. But I agree with you, Chief. For all the demonstrations, I don't recall ever actually using the warning.
Never use it.
That's correct.
So sorry to derail us.
No, it's good questions. So, so as we keep on going down, approved tactics and weapons to disperse or control a non-compliant crowd. So if negotiations, don't result in what we need, then display of officers, and that's usually done in a line on the street and stuff, so they can see that visible presence of police officers. We have used encirclement and arrests after dispersals have been given, or if we do see someone that's committing a crime, and then we can outline and get that one person, we can do the encirclement and arrests. And then police formations and use of batons. This goes into where we're not going to just K3 still in its effect in the use of batons. Even if we do have them out for a show of force, we still have to follow K3 if we are going to use force against a person. And batons shall never be used for crowd control, crowd containment, or crowd dispersal, except for a specific below. And that's like if you can articulate the reason for using that level 2 use of force. So we're getting the good stuff here. The weapon launch device, chemical agents, hand-thrown chemical agents. here. And then we do have 13652, which you'll see throughout this whole document, like I said. And so, and then we can pretty much get into this the next time we meet, but we do have certain sections here when it's appropriate, when it's not. And that's a lot of it is injunction language or language in 13652. And then
Because a good amount of this is that chemical munitions part is injunction language. It sounds like we probably won't have what we have in the other policies, you know, specific delineations of authorized use, prohibited use, etc., since we're stuck with it. So it
Well,
sounds like,
yeah, and this is our train bulletin. I'm sorry to cut you off. I'm sorry.
okay.
Just this is our crowd control, and this is like our overall policy on crowd control, but the specific, you know, policies that Joe went over and stuff, or when we hear flashbangs or, you know, gas, that they're specific, will have all that stuff in there. So as we go down, we're going to have weapons prohibited for crowd control and crowd dispersal, and that's lethal force. We're never going to use the lethal force on a crowd. Canines, that's big. And this is all stuff from the old policy. Horses, we do not have horses right now, but we do in case if we do get horses down the future. I know we had horses when I first started here. We did get rid of the horse unit. Then we brought it back and now we have gotten rid of it. So we're going to leave it in there just in case if it does come back. Fire hoses, obviously from the 60s, we're going to leave that in there. And then the motorcycle and police vehicles, this is the bump technique. This was big for the port protest. We don't want our motorcycles bumping people anymore. And that came out of that lawsuit back in the port in 2003. So SIMs, so this is skip fire, wooden dowels, stinger grenades are prohibited, and that came out of the 2003 port protest. And then, so this is the section right here, number 2, about SIMs, and then it goes into what's prohibited and what can be used. And we do have only train, and a lot of this is from the 13652 section. Electronic immobilization devices, so such as tasers, stun guns, or stun shields, should not be used for crowd control management or crowd control dispersal. And then we still, if we are going to use our taser, it has to be in accordance with K3. And the same with aerosol chemical agents. We did add in a section on medical here, and that was a lot of 13652, which I cited here to make sure that people that are affected, if we do, for some reason, do use chemical agents on a crowd, that we do have medical on scene. And I don't want to say that it's, if the EOC is activated, we are going to have AMR on scene. We do have our ambulance or flock will be in the EOC for any large demonstrations that happen in the city of Oakland. So we can make sure that we're constant communication with them to get them to the scene if there's a situation where we are going to deploy. So arrest, this section goes over arrests, especially large scale arrests, and how the incident commander or ops chief is supposed to proceed. And this continues to talk about arrests. Use of handcuffs. So all persons subject to arrest and demonstration shall be handcuffed in accordance with our policies. And a lot of this, especially for large scale demonstrations that are taking place in Oakland, we will have flex cuffs available. And we do use flex cuffs if there's a mass arrest situation. And then there is a section about juveniles. Juveniles arrested in demonstrations shall be handled and consistent with the policies, OPD policies. This goes into cite and release for especially adults and demonstrations. And then we get into the mutual aid aspect of this. And this, we still have DGO L3. We did change a little bit of this in here to fit the current lawsuits that were taking place right now. And I'll hit on a couple of key points. And that's just to make sure mutual aid agencies are briefed and provided an OPD crowd control policy. We do have to make sure that agencies are provided a copy of the Anti-Police Terror Project lawsuit. We do brief on the OPD's unity of command, make sure they know who's in charge. And then I want to get to the one point. To the extent possible, unless there is public safety emergency, outside law enforcement units shall not be assigned to frontline positions or used for crowd intervention, crowd control or dispersal, and shall be deployed as units in order to maintain department and unit integrity and used for infrastructure protection or custody and control. It's basically fixed positions. We don't. Jennifer, you got a question?
Thanks. It was that earlier section about self-defense. I'm wondering how that might intersect with AB 48. Like, could self-defense be self-defense against someone threw a bottle at me? Because there needs to be that great bodily injury or lethal threat part.
Do you know what section that was, or?
It was very
Going
recent.
up?
No. It was under mutual aid.
Oh.
And it was something
Self-defense right here.
Yes, that part.
So, however, OPD officers and mutual aid may reasonably necessary force allowed by law against any individual in self-defense or defense of another person or officer. So you're saying that AB 48 applies to this? So it has to, if we're going to defend somebody or try to protect a life, it has to be great bodily injury, or?
I mean,
Yeah.
I would certainly welcome that, but that's not what AB 48 says. AB 48 says deployment of SIMs and chemicals.
And if I could just jump in, Jeff,
Oh, yeah, go ahead.
I remember this section when we talked about it when we were talking with about the injunction language, and we intentionally added allowed by law. And I'm thinking maybe we footnoted again to 13652, because basically 13652 takes AB 48 language. So we were very intentional. Our previous policy did not have the allowed by law in there. It just says that nothing in the policy shall prevent someone from defending themselves, but we wanted to be specific and add the allowed by law, which covers the AB 48, to know that there are still a threshold that has to be met to be able to use kinetic energy weapons and chemical agents. So maybe just footnoting the allowed by law and again referencing 13652 would help reinforce that piece.
That sounds great. Thank you.
So also that we want to make sure that, you know, we do have pathfinders. So let's say we do activate mutual aid. We do assign an OPD personnel with those outside agencies, and we want to make sure that they have their body worn camera. That's the OPD officers, so they can document what or if any, what the mutual aid agencies are doing. And then coming down to documentation. I'll try to make this go fast. So want to make sure that there's video recording at all times. That's with the video units. So we want people not just with our body worn cameras, but we do have special officers out there videotaping the crowd and videotaping officers to see what they're doing. So it just gives us more evidence when we go back to help investigate this, especially if there's a use of force, mass use of force, or mass arrests. So reporting as a commander shall ensure the deputy chief of bureau field operation is notified of the incident in a timely manner. This just goes over what the incident commander needs to do, especially before the event and after the event, and make sure, especially if certain things are requested, like mutual aid, or if unlawful assembly is declared, that they have to do an after action report. Public information in the media, we definitely added new law in here, and that's the, I did footnote it, that's Penal Code 409.7 is in here for the media portion. And it's basically cut from the law. Training, we want to make sure that all OPD people are trained in this. So that's why we have the training aspect in this. Crowd management coordinator, it was always the special operations section commander. We did change it to, or I don't know if it was in the old policy chief, but we wanted to make it, give the chief of police the opportunity to designate somebody if they didn't want the SOD commander or SOS commander to be it. But in history, and I think it is now, it's going to be the SOS commander. And that just outlines what the coordinator needs to do. And then as we come down, we did add in the 13652. I think it's 0.1 section. So if we do use gas or kinetic energy weapons, that we have to produce a report, and that's it. If it's used against a crowd or during crowd management, we have to produce a report within 60 days, and that's the guidelines for the report. And then the last part I already went over at the beginning, that goes over the lawsuits. So just so gives a little bit of history in case of people want to change this document, they can go back on it. So 801.
801. Good work.
So I expect comments on this. I know that you guys are going to go through this. I did go briefly through it as quickly as I could in the time allotted. So I do look forward to you guys' comments and questions in the next upcoming meetings.
Thank you for taking us through it. Question, is this a document that is public, can be posted to the commission website as a draft?
I believe so, yes.
Great. I have you down slotted as coming back on this policy on September 12th. I think we talked about on Monday.
Okay.
I think we could get on track. We could still be on track. I think to the extent that we can, we should try to do offline edits or send comments or drafts to Lieutenant Thomason so that he can incorporate some, where the department can sort of figure out if it can be or not incorporated in the meanwhile, so we can get as much work done. I know it's very difficult. I do see a community question. I will save it for the next time. I'll send it to a copy and send it to Lieutenant Thomason so that he can address if need be. Thank you all. We are going to take the Labor Day weekend off and come back on the, oh my God, what day is it? The 7th, Wednesday, September 7th. On that date, we should have a slew of impact reports, either publicly posted or presented at that particular meeting, and go over sims and flashbangs. Maybe breaching. Maybe breaching. We'll see if we got the time. Any other closing thoughts or remarks? It's okay if you do, but I understand not wanting to. Have a good night, everyone. Again, thank you for all your hard work. It shows in these policies. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Have a great night, everyone.
Thank you.
Everyone, bye.
Thanks. Good night.
Good night.